This is The Convergence.
All right, welcome back to another edition of The Convergence. I'm your host, Derrick Mains. Excited this week. I have a great friend on the show, Bryce Skalla, who is the president of Mindsly. I'm actually involved with Mindsly and have been I've been involved with the part of this Mindsly project long before it was even a thing. I think going back to like 2015. But welcome on the show, Bryce. I'm excited to talk about what Mindsly is today, how it applies into the metaverse in particular, because we're talking about Web 3.0 today, but really talking about mental health in the metaverse. Maybe, Bryce, you can give me a little bit of background. I know your background is heavily in the legalized cannabis business. At least that's where our connection sort of came to play. How about tell us a little bit about your background, and then we can get into a little bit more about Mindsly and what it is and does.
So it's good to be here, by the way. Good to see you, Derrick, always. I grew up in Southern California, and it was a beautiful place. It was kind of the new age of, revolution was occurring out there. I had a lot of issues just as a kid. I was a troublemaker. And so once I had dealt with the consequences of my decisions in my youth, I ended up moving into mental health. And that was my first real career lifetime. And I went to school for it. I started practicing, and I did everything from, individual counseling to group therapy, psych evals. I worked with court-ordered patients for substance abuse, domestic violence. And I loved doing it, but I'd always been an entrepreneur. And so for really that whole time, since I was a child, I'd always had a side business. And eventually one of those businesses started to be successful beyond what I was making in counseling. And I absolutely love counseling. I think that being of service this life is critical. And I realized that I could do it without doing it for a job. Because when you're in counseling, every day you're meeting someone on traditionally the worst day of their life. Like they don't come in, right. they don't hit therapy on a winning streak.
Yeah, they don't come in because they don't need therapy. They come in because they actually do need therapy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I moved away from that and got into marketing and sales, and I had a fashion business for a number of years, and then that parlayed into some retail stores, and then I got into marketing really full time, and that ended up kind of becoming my bread and butter. And long story short, I had kind of an epiphany one day through a psychedelic ceremony that it was time for me to move into something else. And so I moved into cannabis. And although, if you'd asked my friends in high school, they would have told you I was a huge cannabis guy. I really hadn't been a cannabis guy for about 20 years. But I had some health issues that I was able to, help resolve with cannabis. And it kind of opened up my mind to that as a treatment option. And so I moved into that for about 8 years, worked pretty heavily in it. We had taken that company public, which was its own fun roller coaster, and met a lot of amazing people, learned a lot, which is, the fun part about it. And once that had kind of, I always say we want someone to love our child as much as we love them. And once they found that partner, it's my job then to support it on moving on. And so, that's really what we did is I sought to find someone who loved my baby as much as me. And when I did, it was time for me to move on. And psychedelics played such a critical role in my life, as well as mental health. I've been going to counseling since I was little. And so when we started kind of working on this Mindsly project, one of the, our coworkers, Jeff Rosas, had been working in virtual reality. And, Facebook bought Meta.
And there was even somebody else that was their COO for a while, right? In the virtual reality company. So that's my connection to the project. So Jeffrey and I go way back, and I've worked on multiple projects with him over the years. And I think it was about a 6-month period. I stepped in as the COO of that project early on.
Well, I think I'd heard about you for 2 years probably before I met you.
Right. We've been right. That's great.
Well, I think that even I think my company did some stuff with Fat Scooters or with your last company. Yeah. I couldn't make it, but I know that we actually did something there. Yeah, so I know that you met a lot of the
Joe, who worked for me, I believe, is a good friend of yours, and so it's a small world after all. In the end, we were in orbit of each other, and it just sort of came together with the Mindsly project. That's awesome.
Well, I think when you do good things, I think that reputation precedes somebody, and I think that the longer you do business, the more the smaller that circle gets with those people, and so you start to gravitate to them, right? And so. True. So one of the things that, I got to meet John Weiss, who was the founder of a virtual reality called Hypatia. And that's where, Jeff was working when I had initially met him. And something that always really stuck with me that John Weiss said was that he built this, and it was education focused, was its primary purpose, experiential education, was that he built it for the child that would not be able to leave their state. I think the way he says it, it's for the rural kid in Indiana who would never be able to leave Indiana, and he wanted them to see the Louvre and have that experience. And I just think that's such a beautiful intention behind the project, right? Unfortunately, it was really early. I mean, they were, I think, second or third virtual reality. I mean, weren't you guys? It was like,
it was way too early. I mean, even to the point when John and I worked really closely together, we started pivoting a lot towards 360 video, because we, deep down inside, we knew this was like way too early, but they were, at that time, they were still video production. People still wanted video production. So we were like, maybe we can make some money there, but it was tough, right? It's tough being a pioneer, because the pioneers are the ones that take the thumping, and we took the thumping. So we talked about John a little bit, and John's vision of how he could use virtual reality to connect the dots between people. And so when did you come into this? How did that work? Yeah.
Well, so Jeff and I are starting to kind of plan the public strategy for Item 9, and we ended up going out to lunch one day with and
Item 9 was the cannabis company, right? Yeah. So just to clarify that, yeah, Item 9 was the cannabis company, Arizona-based cannabis company. I give a little plug. I mean, it's the bougiest cannabis in Arizona. It's it's the cannabis that all the CEOs smoke. So if that tells you anything, I guess. Absolutely.
And I appreciate that. So, psychedelics were a really big part of my journey. That was not something that I used recreationally when I was younger. Like I say that as a precursor, because I've really learned about them as an adult, right? So I'm out, we're talking about the strategy, and John Weiss starts sharing with me that he as well is, uses psychedelics as a tool. And so we connect and we start talking, and that's when he gives me the backstory on Hypatia. And so flash forward 5 years, and Jeff and I are working on a telehealth application for like concierge medical services and the psychedelic products brand. One of the things that we did with the cannabis company, Item 9, that I think is critical is we had a full education department right out the gate, because education with new products in new industries is absolutely critical, especially when you're dealing with psychoactive substances, right? And so we started looking at, okay, if we're going to do these products, how do we provide the education around proper dosing, frequency, the intended use for these, what symptoms they treat and don't? Because I think that when something new comes on the market, kind of like cannabis, all of a sudden it's the cure-all.
Everybody.
Right? Chris Rock has that hilarious skit about tussin. Just put some tussin on it. And right. And I've heard so many people, just like, oh, cool, well, you should just use cannabis. And then I sit down with our cannabis educator, and she's like, well, okay, so is it chronic pain? Is it nerve pain? Is it muscle pain? Is it like what type of pain? And I personally, and I have, a really bad back, and I didn't even think about the fact that there was so many different types of pain. And like, that's just one herb. When we say psychedelics, we're talking about an array of different molecules. And so I really wanted to make sure that we were educating the people that were going to be using this. So we start going down the rabbit hole of AI, and all of a sudden one day I'm reading some research papers on psychedelics, and one of the white papers that pops up is on psychedelics and virtual reality. And so then I started going down the rabbit hole of virtual reality and mental health. And one of the things that hit me very quickly was that they're having incredible results. Obviously with psychedelics, it's all over the news now, but with virtual reality as well. And, we had really been thinking about our concierge application, that maybe we should gear it more around mental health, just given the, how insane that problem is and how vast it is right now, since the pandemic. And so we've really been toying with that. And one of the things that hit us right away was that we have this massive world that was built in with a lot of security features for anti-bullying, for anti-aggression, language protocols, things like that had been tabled for a couple of years because the adoption rate of virtual reality had really slowed down. Now, since that had kind of been tabled, and it's still active and it can be used, but they had stopped development on it. Since then, Facebook has come out as Meta. A lot of these big things have happened. And I think that, what we're seeing right now is really, it is the pioneering of virtual reality. It's kind of like the cannabis is the cure-all. Like right now, virtual reality is just, you're in a computer land. there's still not a ton of intention for it. It's just kind of,
right.
We're going to be a digital version of ourselves, which I think is very cool, and it's very, future forward.
It's a social media platform, right? I mean, that's all it really is. It's an extension of a social media platform. But the utility of what virtual reality can do, other than I have seen some things with AR and VR, particularly around like automotive repair. Mm-hmm. Right? Plumbing, electrical training, things where you need to be able to use your hands and have a visualization of what's happening and be aware of your surroundings and things. But education hasn't been a big part just yet. It's more kitschy, I think, than anything. It's not widespread adoption just yet.
Absolutely. And so when we started looking at this, we were, one of the first articles that I read that was really impactful to me was, we joke about it in mental health that, Derrick, you probably hear me say it all the time, but for some reason, humans in the Western culture, if we have an ailment from our neck down, we'll talk about it with everybody. We're not embarrassed. We're not ashamed. We're happy to share that with the public. But if that ailment is the neck up, there is all this embarrassment and shame and stigma that is associated with that, right? And like the reality is that diabetes is a chemical imbalance in your body. If that chemical imbalance was happening in your head, it could be depression or anxiety or any of these other, issues. But for some reason, diabetes is accepted and depression is not. And so people have a hard time engaging in treatment. That's one of the things that, we struggled with in mental health was being able to continue to have someone re-engage in treatment. And especially like once someone gets relief, we're good, right? Like if you're a diabetic and you take your insulin and you feel good, you're going to continue to take your insulin. But for some reason, the majority of people who take medicines for their head, when the depression goes away, we don't need it anymore. I feel great. and so keeping people keeping people engaged in that process is a really important thing. And so when I'm reading this white paper, the studies that they did was on the adoption and success rates of utilizing virtual reality for mental health. Now, when they're doing it in a very specific way, whether it's having those clinical sessions be in a beach setting or in a forest setting, so it removes some of the white societal noise of it. But what they found was that they had a 20% better adoption rate, meaning that we had 20% more people get involved in treatment when they were an avatar of themselves, because they had anonymity. They didn't feel judged or persecuted for sharing what was going on with them. But to me, one of the bigger pieces of the study was that they saw 30% better outcomes and engagement in therapy, meaning that, I don't know if you've gone to a counselor or not, but a lot of times if you go to a counselor, session one is, this is where I'm at, this is what's going on, let's get to know each other. Session 2, you start to talk about things. And finally, about session 4 or 5, you're like, bleh, here's really what's going on with me. This is really what I'm seeking treatment for, right? Now, when someone is just an avatar version of themselves, they now have the ability to go in and get gut level honest. Like session 1, they can just come in and be like, hey, this is who I am. This is why I'm here. And they're more inclined to be honest in an ongoing treatment setting. And so we're seeing a lot of results there, right?
All right, I want to chat with you for a minute or two about Central Business Development. They're my sponsor and underwriter here at the show, and I think it's important to spend a little bit of time understanding what they do, because if you're listening, you're probably interested in this marketplace and you maybe even have an idea. So one of the things I really like about Ryan and the team at Central is that they are really entrepreneurs. They aren't just a development firm that sits there and takes orders from big companies of, hey, we need you to build this out. They really are partners. I've seen this with them now multiple times. I've had listeners of this show that have reached out to them and created projects with them. I've had guests of the show create relationships with Central Business Development. And what they all have really found is that there's this great opportunity to be an entrepreneur with them, where you can approach them with an idea and say, hey, here's what we were thinking, and really get a jam session and a whiteboard session with these guys and figure out, how do you take that idea and make it a reality if it's possible? Or is that even an idea that should be considered in blockchain just yet? That's what I like about what Central does. So I would encourage you to check out centralbusinessdevelopment.com. Reach out to them, even if it's just, hey, look, we're we're wondering how, I don't know, how blockchain is going to affect our real estate investment firm in the future. And you want to just have that time chatting with folks that understand and know this industry. And maybe there's a project to be created there for you. Maybe there's an opportunity to be an entrepreneur out inside your industry and create something new and exciting that will not only affect your business and how it works into the future, but might be a disruptor to other industries as well. I literally just came from a lunch with a guy I've known for years, an investor guy here in town. And, we were talking about this same thing, and particularly, and I listen, especially as a white male, I don't want to try to say that, I have a rough life, because I'm very blessed, but I've my father, my stepmom, my brother have all passed away in the last couple of years. In every situation, I've had to step up and done the estate and do the accounting and all these kind of things. And you just don't have a break to even think about it. And he mentioned the same thing. He said, he had a younger brother that was very successful and, had just had a baby and took his life. And he's like, it just makes me realize that we do bottle things up. And I'm not trying to, say it's men or women or anything else, but it is true. If you don't feel comfortable going to a therapist, I've never been to a therapist, never been to counseling. But after my meeting with him today, I was like, shit, what is deep down inside there that you push down until eventually one day it doesn't push down anymore. And I think, trying to find help. I mean, we hear about this cry for help all the time. When that cry for help is across town and it's $150 or $200 an hour, it might be something you could ever do.
100%. Well, and Derek, to that, historically, our number one risk, our number one demographic that is at risk for suicide is men, retirement age. That's right. The number one at-risk group. And what we're actually seeing since the pandemic, which being a father scares me, but it's accurate, we're actually starting to see now that I think it's the 17 to 21 is actually our high, and it's not just male, it's male and female. Yeah. But children 17 to 21 are the highest group that's at risk for suicide right now, just with, being isolated and all these things. And so, counseling is a wonderful tool, but a big piece of that, and I always kind of say that when someone makes a lifestyle change, right, whether it's diet, counseling, exercise, friend groups, they stop partying, whatever that is, that is a really pivotal shift in their world. And it needs to be supported by the people that they associate with, by their daily habits and rituals. And a lot of times it's hard for people to do that when it's home, therapist home. And so when we started looking at the app we were doing for education, I'm like, man, this would be so much more effective if we were to have something where you could walk in and you could talk to somebody and look at these things and see visuals. And then we're like, wow, we can do this with that virtual reality platform. And so the more that we went down that road, the more we realized that this was not only a neat idea, this was an absolutely needed service and critical piece. And so we really, looked at how do we associate a number of these services in a singular place. And I really believe that virtual reality is the key to that. To John Weiss's point about that rural child in Indiana, I think that same kid right now, post-pandemic, needs mental health services. And if he lives in a rural town, the reality is there's only going to be, if there are any mental health workers, there's a very select few, and everyone, went to the same high school, goes to the same church. And how honest are you going to be with that person that knows your parents? Not that guy's going to violate your confidentiality, but
but you're just not comfortable, right? You're just not comfortable when,
I don't want to tell my dad's friends all my problems. I just don't want to do that. And so, I think as an extension to John's vision for this, I think, what we're now intentionally creating is a space where that same kid can get the same mental health services that my children can in a city like Phoenix. And I think that, knowing that is a critical thing. And so I think when you're on that lifestyle change piece and you're starting to understand mental health and how different things support and affect you, having access to additional services within the space that are naturally occurring, you can always get referred out. The providers on the network can refer you out to a psychiatrist. If you need medication services, that's not our piece there. But being able to get in and say, okay, cool, I'm going to start addressing this depression. And and the therapist says, hey, you know what, I think after this, why don't you go, go next door and look at what some of the herbs are. They provide education there on what other naturally occurring herbs that you can get from your health food store that can help support you in that. Or, go take a virtual reality walk, go take a virtual bike ride, go do these things. And the science around that now is coming out. And although there's not the same health benefits of taking a hike or riding a bike within the metaverse, sure, when you're riding a bike in sunshine in the metaverse, you're getting the same endorphin and dopamine releases that you do when you do it outside. And so not for the health benefits, but for the mental health benefits of what that does for someone who's struggling with depression, anxiety, isolation, a lot of those things, we're able to help support them in improved mental health through a lot of these services. And they're in one place. They don't have to go to 17 providers, sign up with all these people, have a bunch of cash. They can do it within this metaverse. And I think making these services accessible to people is not only, like I said, a very cool thing. I think now that we know that it's possible, we have a responsibility to do that. And I think that everyone on the team, awesome, including yourself, is taking that really seriously. Yeah. I just think it's a very cool thing to support people this way.
Yeah. And I think, I think about telehealth and telemedicine, and it's, to me, it's the way that I engage for the most part with doctors anymore. I mean, I still do my physical and those kind of things, but, when I've got a problem with my eye or whatever that might be, I'm using the telehealth. I'm not trying to call my doctor's office and set an appointment. I mean, that's just so archaic and takes so much time, and I have to drive down there. And with COVID, now with the COVID rising again, now, masks are required again at the doctor's office. And I'm just like, let me just do the telehealth thing. It's so much easier. And it frustrates me that most doctors can't do it. Even my physician, I'm like, can I just call you on the phone? And she's like, no, technically you can't. You got to come down here. So what Mindsly really is doing is creating this virtual world where there's relaxation. There's, those kind of things that occur in there. There's no bullying. There's none of that kind of thing. And that's the cool thing about the original creation of it, because it was supposed to be a safe space for kids.
Exactly.
And then adding to it the telehealth piece, but mental health,
correct,
which I think is a really unique way to approach this, where you can get some basic counseling, some basic advice, just somebody to talk to, via the telemedicine aspect, and you can be doing it sitting on the side of a river or in a canoe out on a lake.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I think, and while you were talking, one of the things that kind of came to me right away is, any of the times that I went to therapy, and a lot of times it was forced on me, it wasn't by my own choice. And I've attended tons of it now, willfully as an adult, but man, what a different experience it would have been if I could have met that person at the edge of the forest and we could have walked through the trees, right? Now I'm talking to a trusted friend that I'm out exploring with, as opposed to being in this very clinical, sterile setting. And I think there's really something to that as to how we as humans, it's like if you're walking with your buddy down the sidewalk in the city, you have a very different conversation when you're walking through the woods. It's a very different, you start to disassociate some of those stigmas that society puts on us, and you start to get a little bit more open. And so, I think being able to create those environments for people who need them is a very, very cool evolution in technology and mental health. And then even more than that, being able to have a metaverse where other people can interact. And then, we've been diligently working to set up experiences in our real world, in the analog, I call it, with events and health fairs and stuff like that. Because I think that when you're on that journey, I always say it's like someone who quits drinking or starts getting really into the gym. The people that you associated with were not that all they did was your old lifestyle, but that's traditionally what you do together, right? And so we have to start to break some of those old patterns and start to create new ones. And I think having new people who are on that same path as you, it really makes that a lot easier. And the metaverse for a lot, like I'm not a gamer. I'm a little bit older. I just never went down that road. I do have a number of people that I know that do it, and I've seen a lot of them develop really good friendships within that gaming space. And so even though I'm not firsthand with it, and I've talked to a lot of people who are like, well, I don't understand. I have a lot of people who those are their best friends. That's what they do. They go online and they talk to their networks.
It's absolutely true. And I do believe that it's certainly younger generation more than our generation or older. But I will tell you, I have high school buddies that just talked to one earlier today, and I was like, "Hey, have you talked to so and so?" He's like, "Yeah, bro, I talk to him every freaking day." I'm like, "You do?" And he's like, "Yeah, we both play the same game." And he's like, "When are you going to get on Xbox again? Because you used to play with us too." And I'm like, he's like, "We're all still there playing. We're all still talking about our days and talking about business, and they just happen to be playing a game. They're not."
I have a number of groups that say the same thing to me, and I just haven't been able to get into. But I mean, I have a lot of friend groups I haven't talked to. Like, I don't talk to regularly.
And they all play Call of Duty together every weekend. If at 11 o'clock at night, they all put their headset on and they talk and they screw around for an hour. And the funny thing is, I'm a very type A personality, obviously, but two of my best friends are the absolute complete opposite. They will not leave the house unless I call them and say, "Hey, you want to do something?" Right. And but they all stay connected. That group stays very heavily connected via games. And I saw a TikTok video last night that was just really sort of soul crushing. And it was a guy who worked in customer service for a gaming company. And he was reading off a email from somebody who was canceling their subscription. And the guy said, "I've been playing this game for 5 years. All of my best friend in the world I met through this game. I've never met this person in person. But I just got word that they had passed away in a car accident earlier today. And that's the end for me. Like, the only reason I played this game is because this is where my best friend was, and I just can't come back here anymore. And can you cancel?" And I was like, wow, right? To think about that, there are so many people that are so disconnected right now that have this, entire virtual existence. And these are very close emotional, friendships and relationships that are developed this way. So it is, yes, I get it. Many people that are listening to this might be a little bit older and going, "Come on, are you kidding?" But it's just like the telephone. It's just like face-to-face, particularly the COVID generation, that they went to school online. Like, they didn't go to a classroom and sit with other kids. Their entire universe is in the metaverse, or it is online, and the metaverse is just an extension of that. So that's really fascinating. So timeline, I mean, this is obviously a huge project. You've got to bring back to life a large piece of software. You've got to incorporate into that a number of different connections, including, the telemedicine piece, the nutraceuticals and plant-based medicine piece. I mean, is this a year-long project? Is this something we hope to see middle of next year, you think? Or where do you?
Yeah, I think for the final rollout of the actual platforms with all the services engaged, functioning, I think you're probably looking at middle of next year. Products are they're on the way now. We've been really working with some amazing people on the project, and I won't get into names yet. I will hear very, very soon. But we've got some just amazing partnerships with people that feel the same thing. One of the cool, like I said, my mom was very new age and very she's a hippie doctor, and so I grew up with herbal supplements. My wife is an amateur hippie doctor. And she goes, Harv, we make our own cough syrups. We do a lot of that stuff here. Now, I am a go to Walgreens and, buy Mucinex type of person, but
me too.
I also love that my wife loves my health a lot, many times more than I do.
Have you tried Tussin? That might salute the
put it on everything, right?
That goes back to our
right. Yeah. And so I think one of the cool things for me in watching the cannabis trend, was I wasn't a cannabis person. So I'm grateful. I think it's an incredible plant. I think it has a lot of uses that we haven't even discovered yet. We were only focused on the top 2 or 3 compounds. There's, I think, as much as 12 different compounds in cannabis. So I think the education is just starting. But what I really saw from a mile high view was that people were starting to realize that herbal medications had a lot of value, and that maybe the things that we had heard about herbal medications weren't 100% accurate. I don't believe that people, I'll be very, very optimistic here. I do not believe that health officials try to dissuade us from things that they do believe could help us. I don't think that. I think there's a lot of people. I don't think so either. Yeah, I have some friends that might argue that after the, some of the more recent activities, but I think that we really saw a lot of people kind of coming out of their shell. I've worked with a lot of, in my time there, and still even now, I get a lot of calls from people who have issues and they want, direction on who to talk to. I dealt with a lot of senior citizens who had never at any point in their life used a psychoactive substance, some who had never smoked cigarettes, drank alcohol, nothing. And now they're in a place in their life where they have some symptom that could be better treated with cannabis than that. And so I think this is really the evolution of that, you know. Without going too far down the psychedelics rabbit hole on this, you know, this episode, we're really seeing, you know, the thing, because I've been so deep into psychedelic treatments and you know, the efficacy of those treatments with different symptoms. And, you know, like I said, there's like 7 different molecules. When we say psychedelics, there's a lot, but we just say that as a broad term. And so I started doing a lot of the research on the clinical trials and a lot of these things. So one of the things that hit me so hard with the VR, and that's why that first white paper really hit me, because it was what we're finding now. You know, when I worked in mental health, it was like our goal was a 30% reduction in symptoms, which, you know, to somebody who's been severely struggling, that's huge. It's massive, right? That's life-changing.
Sure, yeah.
But when you're just looking at an industry from the outside, you're like, okay, so we're not really going to treat the issue. We're going to reduce the symptoms of the issue by 30%. It's kind of like, I mean, I feel like we can do better. And what
what's the root cause? Let's go to root cause analysis here.
Like,
you know, let's get into it.
Anything else where they're like, we're just going to reduce the symptoms by 30%, and you're like, awesome, man, cool, you know.
Yeah.
And so, you know, when I started looking at like some of the success they're having with psychedelics and some, you know, cure rates being at up to 90% of the year with no remission, and then you start looking at these mental health figures around virtual reality, it was just like, man, like we really,
how do you match it?
Yeah, it's critical that we start to get these solutions out to people, because psychedelics are being talked about more now, but I haven't heard anything on virtual reality and mental health, you know. And if you're doing telehealth, like even a telehealth with your doctor right now, right? So traditionally we're on our phone, we're on a computer, and I'm either, and even right now, I'm either going to look at you or I'm going to look at my camera so that you can see my eyes. Either way, you and I are not going to make eye contact on this.
No, we're not. Nobody makes eye contact when you do podcasts, right?
Right.
Everybody's looking at the cameras, right? Yeah.
And so what we're finding with virtual reality is it's truly the first digital landscape where we can make eye contact and it can be personalized.
That's
and
interesting.
There's something profound about when you make eye contact with another human, even if you're an avatar and you can look in their eyes and you know that they're looking back in your eyes. There is a human connection that happens in that moment that, you know, it creates oxytocin in the body. I'll spare you the chemical reaction, but it's one of the reasons,
I mean,
you know,
you always gaze into my eyes kind of thing. Yeah, hierarchy of needs, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You know, socialization is a critical piece, and especially with our younger generation. And I think that what we're seeing now is, you know, I mean, you think even today, there's still the same childhood stigma of counseling. They don't want to go. They don't want to go talk to somebody. They don't want their friends to know they're talking to somebody. But if you could go into something that resembles a more digital gaming environment, like you do for fun, and like you hang out with your friends, they're more comfortable. You know, hey, can we go just stand on that building and do it today? Hey, can we go fly around on a cloud and do it today? Absolutely. And now we're able to engage them with a lot of their interests. And that generation isn't 14 or 15 anymore. That generation is in their 20s now and their 30s now. And so we're, you know, by kind of speaking to the new digital generation, we're able to really, you know, hopefully reach more people through this avenue than we have been able to traditionally. And I think that's, you know, that at the end of the day is what it's about. Being able to help as many people as we can, in as broad a sense as we can. And, you know, and with the invention of blockchain and, you know, and cryptocurrencies and a lot of these things that now have application both in a digital environment and analog environments, we're really starting to see that these worlds are going to merge. You know, that if you're going in to receive services from this provider within the digital landscape, you know, the ecosystem of Mindsly, great. If there's something that you need to seek services with outside of there, wonderful. The same currencies can apply. Right. And so it's the first time that we've really seen these worlds kind of merge together in this way. And I just think it's really exciting to be on the forefront of that, especially with mental health. I feel in a very like synchronous way, like, you know, to do counseling and to focus on service and move into digital marketing, a lot of these things, I feel like, you know, the universe kind of like aligned the stars for me to like meet back here. And I feel like this is the evolution of my journey. And it's just such a satisfying feeling, you know, to be.
Hey, there's a reason we call this show the Convergence, right? It is all these things coming back together. And, you know, like we've talked about through this, Hypatia, you know, this is a dead product. It is a product that was developed early on before the metaverse was a thing. It was a VR metaverse in and of itself. It didn't get enough adoption. It got shelved. And now here we are in 2022 coming out of the pandemic and saying, wow, now the use case is there. Now the utility is there for this product, and it's going to be resurrected and improved upon, which I think is the American way. You know, we create things, but we also improve upon things over time. Mm-hmm. And this is exciting to see how mental health is moving into the metaverse. Bryce, how do people find out more about Mindsly right now?
Mindsly.io is the primary website. We also have some additional statements on our crypto page, which is minecoin.io. There's some videos that explain a lot of it. There's some backstory videos on there as well. I really encourage people to get in there. We have the white paper on there, speaks a little bit more to the vision of the company, and these things evolve. And as they evolve and more information comes out, we will continue to update those sites and those locations for the latest up-to-date information about it. So, I encourage all the listeners.
There's a token aspect, right? Yeah, right. And there is a token aspect to this. And to your point, please, listeners, go check this out. But there is a lot more than just Web 3.0 metaverse in this. It is a full stack of tokenization and all of the things that we talk about on this show, creating that sort of decentralized currency inside this space, which is really interesting and fascinating. And I love what Mindsly's doing, and I'm excited and happy to still be a part of it, I guess, from the early Hypatia days. But Bryce, thanks so much. So you can check it out at mindsly.io or mindcoin.io. All right, perfect.
You got it.
Thank you for being here, and thank you all for joining me on the Convergence once again this week, where every week we talk about Web 3.0. Yeah, it was great to have you as always. Thanks again, and until next time.
Thanks for listening to The Convergence. If you want more information about the topics you've heard here today, reach out to us at theconvergencepodcast.com.